Hi, and welcome back to another Basics of Music Theory lesson. Today we're going to go over how to read time signatures and the different classifications of meter. Now, for our purposes, we're going to be using meter and time signature pretty interchangeably. When you get into more arcane theory magics, that's when there is a difference between time signature and meter, but for our purposes, they're the same thing. Now, what is a time signature? Well, it's the numbers that are hanging out at the start of pretty much every measure here. Now, normally you don't have this many time signature changes, but since this is an example all about time signature, it makes sense that we're going to have a lot of them. Now, the way you read a time signature is the top number tells you how many of a certain type of note there are, and the bottom note tells you what type of note you're dealing with. It is not a fraction. A lot of beginning theory students make that mistake, in part because when it's written out in text, you might see 4-4 as 4/4, but that's just to tell you the 4 on the left is on top of the 4 on the right. And so, as to be more specific with 4/4, 4 is the top number, telling us how many notes we're dealing with, and the bottom number 4 tells us what type of note, and that bottom number does imply a fraction. It implies 1 over whatever that number is, in this case 4, so we have 4 quarter notes in this measure, and as you can see, 1, 2, 3, 4 quarter notes are in this measure. This is as opposed to 6/8, where we have 6 1/8 eighth notes in this measure, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, we have 6/8 notes in this measure. Now, the first classification of meter that we'll talk about is simple versus compound. Now, the easiest way to tell if something's simple or compound is there a dot in whatever the beat unit is? In this case, it's a quarter note, and there's no dot, which means it's a simple meter. On the other hand, this is a compound meter, and there is a dot. Now, the way to read a time signature and tell how many beats there are and all of that, in a simple meter, you just look at the bottom number, 1/4, and quarter note is our beat unit. In a compound meter, you need to do a little bit more than that. You take the bottom number, 1/8, and you multiply it by 3, and what do you know, 3/8 notes is a dotted quarter. And so what that means is that the top number needs to be a multiple of 3. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to have you won't be able to have, a dotted two dotted eighth notes. If the top number was 5/8, you'd have a dotted eighth note and something that wasn't a dotted eighth note as your beat unit. So it wouldn't work otherwise. Simple meters, the main beat unit is always a multiple of 2. And so we have quarter notes, which a quarter note's a multiple of 2, and that's how you tell that. Now the next thing we want to deal with is kind of the feel and how do we group notes together. Now, the feel of 4/4 is most accurately described generally as a quadruple meter because we have 1, 2, 3, 4 beats, and so if you divide them, it's just 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. We'll talk about further divisions later. Now, any quadruple meter can also be written with a duple feel, and I've done that over here when you would group that together as 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And it's just a slight difference in feel. Basically, if I were to count it out loud, listen for the accent is 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. We just have an accent on 1, 2, 3, and 4, whereas if it were to have more of a duple type feel, what we would end up with is 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So an accent on the 1 and an accent on the 3, and essentially it almost sounds like we have 2 beats instead of having 4. But like I said, if you write out something that has a quadruple feel as if it's a duple, or something with a duple feel as if it's quadruple, it's not a huge deal. Where you do get more of a big deal with that is duple versus triple feels. Now, 6/8 is a duple meter because as kind of shown over here, we have 2 dotted eighth notes. So there's 2 beats. Now, the way you tell the number of beats for a compound meter is you take the top number, in this case 6, divide it by 3, and you get 2, and we have 2 groupings. And that gives us a different feel than if we were to write this these same number of eighth notes in a simple triple meter like 3/4, where we would have 3/4 notes as our for in the measure, and quarter notes as our beat unit. So where 6/8 will have 1 and 2 and triple meter, simple triple meter like 3/4 is 1 and 2 and 3 and so a slightly different feel, even though it might take the same amount of time to get through them. Now, you'll oftentimes have things that are in 6/8 that end up giving a feel of 3/4, or things that are in 3/4 that give a feel of 6/8. They're used a little bit interchangeably, but if the entire piece feels like it has 2 beats but 6 notes across it, you're in 6/8, and if it sounds like it has 6/8 notes but 3 main beats, then you're in 3/4. The last thing I want to just touch on is these symbols right here, this C and this C with a line through it. This C stands for common time, and common time is just 4/4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And it's probably the most popular time signature, at least in Western music. So it just became a C for common time, and that lets you know you're in 4/4. The C with a slash through it is cut time, and that implies 2/2, which is 2 half notes, 2 half notes. And that's really it. Okay, after this we only have one more lesson on rhythm, at least one more basic lesson. Maybe I'll start going over some ear training stuff and some other things before then so you can really get this all locked down. We've gone through a lot. At this point you should be able to read any type of rhythm and figure out how the notes should be grouped together. And yeah, I hope you're having a great day, and I hope you come back to the channel soon. Alright, bye-bye.